Hi everyone, I'm Angela Kaufman and I'm happy to share a short story that I wrote that is an updated edition from a previously self-published story that I wanted to make available on a different platform for various kind of boring reasons that I won't go into in detail here. So we're going to call this Liberation Christmas, and I'm going to pull up the document. This is my first time trying this, so I don't know how this is going to work out. I might be making all kinds of strange faces as I'm trying to squint to read my writing here. But thank you for joining me. And again, the purpose of my sharing this with you is as a fundraiser: one, to raise awareness; two, to have some fun; and three, as a fundraiser for a group called New York Farm Animal Save. So if you enjoy this story, please contribute a donation of your choosing to this organization. I'm going to put a link to their page on the section below, so you can check them out, check out the work they're doing, join them at one of their regularly occurring vigils if you're in the downstate New York area. Or, feel free to contribute a donation their way if you like the story, if you don't like the story, if you just want to throw some money their way because you think it will shut me up. I mean, whatever. Okay. Dedication. This work is dedicated to those awaiting liberation and those working toward this goal. The time has come. Prologue. Welcome. This second edition version of The Third Christmas, A Liberation Tale, that here on out we'll just call Liberation Christmas, is intended to be shared via auditory narrative. That is, it is meant to be read to you, not read by you. If you are reading this yourself, how did you get my laptop? And furthermore, what is wrong with you? The reason for creating a second edition so soon after publication is largely logistical and mostly boring. Let's just get on with the story. The story begins in a cage. Or is it a cubicle? Or a warehouse? Can you tell the difference? He was drinking again. The others knew it. They could hear the click, click, click. But what else was there to do? And besides, there was so much pain. Bob, 12/23/2019, 11 o'clock p.m. Bob had been in good spirits when he let his colleagues talk him into getting a tarot card reading. Now, as he followed the tarot reader into the lounge, his mood soured. He eyed the young woman with half amusement, half scrutiny. He couldn't help but wonder how much his company was paying for this nonsense. But Christmas only comes once a year, and if this kind of malarkey kept his employees happy, he would indulge. Maybe she would tell him how the new trial of Envicap would go. I'm Renee. She extended her hand, rings on every finger, he noticed. In the background, he could hear laughter and chatter, glasses clinking in toasts, Christmas music filling the restaurant. He took a seat in the dimly lit lounge, a private area away from the festivities. She drew a thick curtain shut, closing him off from the rest of the world. He suddenly became claustrophobic. None of this is real, just fun, he tried to reassure himself. She shuffled a huge deck of cards and began laying them face up. A cherub-looking figure with a trumpet, then a giant tower struck by lightning, people flailing through the air, falling downward. He grew more annoyed with each moment. The ridiculous cards, her J.C. Penney fake bohemian outfit, the pretense of mystique and new age woo-woo. What bothered him most was the silence. She went about her work as if he wasn't there. He wasn't used to being regarded with indifference. Well, he began finally, that certainly is a glum image for a party. Don't you have any good cards? The future isn't good or bad. It's what you make it, she paused, then began again, with greater focus now. It's the third Christmas now. You have heaviness on your conscience. You stand on the brink of a major transformation. He rolled his eyes and made a sound in his throat, a grunt like humph. She continued. You must make a choice. It will change the path you are on. But if you do not listen to what the boy tells you, great losses await. A bleak outlook follows you within a year. Your business will suffer. Karma revisited on you until you listen. He crossed his arms now and began to tap his foot. You must have shuffled your cards wrong, sweetheart. Don't you know who I am? Narrator's note. Welcome to the 21st century, where this kind of condescending, sexist attitude is no longer expected to be tolerated, at least not until Trump's next re-election in 2020 or so, Renee would tell you. Bob may appear to get away with it for now, but as you will come to see, Bob is an asshole. This should require no narrator explaining, but as I need an additional several thousand words to call this a second edition, and some people may need an extra reminder, you're welcome. Happy holidays. Now back to the story. Don't you know who I am? Not for me to know. Do you know who you are? What? Hey, how much did my company pay you to spew this doom and gloom? My business is headed for a major launch, nothing like what you're describing. He took a breath, then continued. This is a party, for Christ's sake. What is it with you? Do you have anything good to say? She closed her eyes a moment, nodded her head slightly, as if taking instruction, and began again. Your son will lead you back. Brandon will show you, but you must listen. Bob was on his feet now, face red. Now I know you're full of shit. My son has been dead for a year. He tore through the curtain. Back in the crowd, partygoers laughed, danced, and drank. Oblivious to the thudding of his heartbeat, his fury at this snake oil saleswoman who had dared bring Brandon into things. A fraud, but she had known his son's name. She must have read the obituary, researched him before coming to fleece his company for her sideshow nonsense. You okay, boss? You look like you've seen a ghost, Frank interrupted his thoughts. Whose idea was it to hire a damn fortune teller? Definitely wasn't mine. I don't give that crap any credence, and you shouldn't either. He clapped his boss on the back and grabbed a drink from a nearby counter. Here, drink up. Enjoy this night. You earned it. Sure did, Bob agreed, gulping down the wine and putting on his business smile. He greeted a man in line at the bar. Mayor John, it's great to see you again. So glad you could make it. Through the banter that followed, he tried to put the fortune teller out of his mind. Renee, 12/24/2019, 2:00 a.m. Renee arrived home later than usual. The clients piling in nonstop, giddy, drunk, eager to learn what the new year would bring. It was an exhausting night, but the pay had been worth it. After filling up on leftover stir-fry, she knelt by a small altar, lit the candles, and named off the dead in whispers of gratitude. I need your help, a voice cut in. She closed her eyes and took a breath, in the manner employed by patronizing parents who don't want to tell their children that they're crossing the line from cute to annoying. Not now, she replied. It's urgent. I need your help, the voice persisted. She opened her eyes, and a man in his early 20s stood there, shimmering with some transparency, but solid enough for her to see. You again. I need your help, please, just for tonight. I need to materialize. Why should I help you, Brandon? I tried. He wouldn't listen. Scenes began to flash in her mind. She remained calm. This wasn't the first time the dead had found her and broadcast images in her mind in this way. He showed her a little boy in a hospital bed. Then more children, hundreds, maybe thousands. But there was more. A room, a lab, cages. She felt their suffering and gasped a breath as if trying to come up for air. All right, she conceded. But I'm going to be sick for days after, so you better make it count. I'll do my best, Brandon replied. Her mantras commenced. She lit different candles then. In the center of the altar, she poured a blend of herbs. She then got into bed, groaning that it would be a long night, and closed her eyes. Brandon appeared again, growing in strength, becoming more vibrant with each breath she took, drawing on her energy to give himself form. It had begun. Frank, 12/24/2019, 2:30 a.m. Whose idea was it to hire a tarot reader? Frank thought, locking the door to his condo. Bob had been upset. Could she have told him? It wasn't possible, Frank reassured himself. If he had known, if he had any idea, it would have been obvious. He poured another drink, hoping his secret was still safe. Bob, 12/24/2019, 3:00 a.m. Clifford Heights was a far cry from the crowded downtown where Renee had lit candles on her altar and was now lending her energy to the spirit of a boy whose name had been Brandon. But it was where Brandon had grown up. In this distant, affluent part of town, Bob was immersed in a ritual of his own, the same one he devoutly performed every night. He poured a drink from his private bar, clicked his remote control, and started his playlist. Tonight it was Christmas Favorites. He set up his laptop to review the projected quarter's earnings. It had been a good year for Cartwright Pharmaceuticals, and the coming year was slated to be even better. He worked late into the morning and through the day. He hardly stopped to eat. Why would he care that it was Christmas Eve? He was alone now, and the holiday meant nothing. A light flickered on his phone. He checked his voicemail. "Hey, Mr. Cartwright, this is Mark Donnery. We've spoken before, kind of. Hey, listen, we've made significant advancements with Ultratech, and I would love to set up a time to talk with you about alternatives to vivisect." He hit delete, muttering, "Get a job, you idiot." He couldn't understand why Donnery pursued him like a love-struck schoolgirl. Their initial meeting hadn't gone particularly well. He remembered the young man stammering through his presentation, his portfolio with crackpot ideas. Some nerve, Bob thought, recalling Donnery's response to Bob's indifference. "Do you want some time to review the studies?" Donnery had asked. "I want some time to be left alone," Bob had snapped in response. His eyes were beginning to blur as evening cold crept in. The playlist began to exhaust all his favorites. He had barely noticed the background noise it made until now. A jangling bell, acoustic guitar, and a man's voice caught his attention. Why had he left the Gordon Lightfoot song on his playlist after all this time? The disembodied voice continued to sing about a lamp burning low, night falling, and the person he wished was there on this winter night. Bob covered both eyes with his hands, rubbing them as if to brush away his thoughts. Numbers, he tried to remind himself. Get back to the numbers. Forget this stupidity. But scenes cut in instead, as if Gordon Lightfoot had personally intruded on his private moments with his song for a winter's night. He could hear Jillian's voice now, singing to him as they held each other on the couch. Lights were low, and a Christmas tree stood in the corner of the cabin they had rented years ago. It had been her idea. A quiet retreat. He shook the memory away. More followed to take its place. Brandon unwrapping his Christmas gifts, Jilly laughing, Pongo, their golden retriever, running around the decorated Douglas fir tree. He picked up the remote control and switched to the next song on the list, Bing Crosby crooning a rhetorical question to test his hearing. Well now, that's an improvement. He got up from the table, closed his laptop, and settled into his recliner. All the rooms in this house, and he barely left the study. No matter, this was the best chair in the house, he told himself. The empty house. He is in a tunnel now. In the way of dreams, it is normal and bizarre at the same time. His feet crunch on seashells, and he accepts this as reasonable until realizing the tunnel is not a beach. A light appears, a lantern, a man with a lantern on top of a cliff. Where had he seen this recently? The light illuminates a path ahead, and he shudders to the core to realize he has been stepping not on seashells, but bones. Animals, then human. He cries out as rats and other ratty-looking things scurry across his bare feet, also rummaging across the bones. They scram in all directions and climb up his legs. He wakes soaked in sweat. Boy with rare cancer awaits experimental drug. 12/24/2016, Mosier, North Carolina. Tommy Plymouth, age 9, awaits eagerly to see his oncologist with his mother and father in Mosier, North Carolina. Plymouth is one of 20 children counting on FDA approval for a new drug called Onbicap. Researchers at Cartwright Pharmaceuticals are hopeful that they have discovered a cure for Tommy's condition. "We are willing to try anything as long as the FDA approves it," Robert Plymouth, Tommy's dad, commented. When asked about his thoughts on the new treatment and what he will do when he is all better, Tommy commented that he wants to be an engineer and design things. The FDA's decision should be finalized within the year. Narrator's note: to my knowledge, Mosier, North Carolina does not exist. However, I needed a fictitious place to set a different story, and also recycling is good. Sylvie, 12/24/2018, 2 p.m. Sylvie crumpled the newspaper and tossed it on the table. Another round of tests had been approved for Cartwright, and that would lead to the suffering of thousands. Her phone began to vibrate. The caller ID read, Elfie. She smirked to herself. Yep. Hey, Sylvie? Yes, Elfie. We're getting together tonight. A family reunion. She took in the message, nodding nervously. Where? Uncle's house. What should I wear? Uncle would probably not approve of this gathering. Gotcha, she said. Late, around 11. Got it. Good, she thought, hanging up. She wouldn't have to miss the concert. Through the thin walls, she heard Brianna rehearsing. Where her daughter had gotten her remarkable talent, Sylvie had no idea. Not even in high school yet, and Bree's teachers had already suggested auditioning her for local performing groups. Sylvie could hear her daughter singing, the carol about a song whispered from the wind to a lamb. She smiled. "Mommy has to run to the car," she called to her daughter. She took the cat carrier out from the closet, filled it with a pair of fake leather gloves, a black ski mask, and a small bag filled with clunky tools. She hauled it into the back of her station wagon and covered it with a blanket. Uncle wouldn't approve. Tonight's mission would be another of the illegal variety. Morality supersedes the law, she reminded herself. Still, Bob, you should know this by now. 12/24/2019, 9 o'clock p.m. Bob peeled himself off the recliner, cursing at the sweat-soaked fabric, making a mental note to have it cleaned. He made his way to the shower, turned on the water so hot it filled the room with steam. His skin turned red. He buried his face in the falling water, hoping to drown out and distract himself from the feeling of seashells, bones crunching beneath his feet. Narrator's note. You may recall a man from a previous story who was described as tight-fisted and who was infamous for not sparing any expense, not even on heat. This man bears a coincidental resemblance to Bob in many ways, except that our protagonist in this story takes boiling hot showers. He may think it makes him cleaner, he may have a thing for pain, or he may secretly harbor a fetishistic desire to become a bouillon cube in his next life, and is just practicing. Perhaps someday we will find out. Today will not be that day, however. Back to the story. He heard a commotion in the water and paused to question himself regarding whether he had left his iPad on continuous play. Had it been playing when he awoke? He couldn't recall, but he must have. He could hear something of a melody now. Then it became choppy. Barking. No, he was in fact hearing barking. He shut off the water and slid the door open, fog dissipating into the bathroom, now chilled by the cold air outside of the shower. He pulled a towel around him, then threw on his clothes. The barking began again, now with a steady banging sound. It was inside the house. How much had he had to drink? He wondered. He followed the sound, half believing he was still in a dream. He began to check. I can feel the hot water from the shower, so this must be real, he tried to convince himself. The barking and thumping were coming from behind a closed door. Brandon's room, or what had been Brandon's room, left untouched, memorialized, even before he died. Since he had disappeared. It had been years. Who's there? No answer, but the barking more incessant now. Opening the door, Bob blinked in surprise. Full noon sun shone in through the window, illuminating Brandon's posters, his favorite Marvel movies. His eyes adjusted to the light. Pongo was running in circles, a happy smile on his golden furry face. Behind him, on the bed, Bob stared right into the smiling eyes of his son. "Merry Christmas," Brandon greeted him. "This is bullshit," Bob declared, and slammed the door shut. Narrator's note. It is well known that bullshit is a term having its roots in the Victorian English phrase, bah humbug. It was presumed that reciting humbug would attract humbugs to you, as was divulged in the late Victorian metaphysical self-help book, Thy Secret. As a result, the term humbug was denounced as bad luck. No one, it appeared, wanted to attract actual humbugs into their home, as, once they arrive, they have a reputation for reproducing heartily and creating quite a mess. Also, decreasing property values. What use they had for bullshit, one can only imagine. Back to the story. Listen to the boy, the fortune teller had told him. This is bullshit, he argued back to himself. Pongo, fucking Pongo? Barked again, scratching at the door now. He opened the door again. Pongo jumped up and licked his face. He could feel the dog's tongue. Pongo was real. He was alive. Or I'm batshit crazy, he told himself, hoping it was the latter because at least that would make sense. Dad, Brandon began, we need to talk. I know this seems like a lot to take in, but we don't have much time. Seems like a lot? What the hell, Brandon? What is this? It's exactly what you think it is. I've gone crazy? I'm drunk? I'm dreaming? Okay, maybe it's not at all what you think. Listen, Dad, you're going to have to trust me. I will answer your questions, but I have to show you. I have to show you some things that won't make sense at first. Please, Dad, this is for your own good. I have to show you, and I don't have a lot of time. Bob approached him cautiously, reached out a reluctant hand, and touched him. He expected his hand to go through his son's body, like in the horror movies, when someone tries to touch a ghost. It didn't. He was solid. You're alive. No, I'm not. I will explain, but I have to show you some things. Dad, it's important. Why now? Why do you want to tell me anything now? Bob snapped. You disappeared. You had the chance to tell me whatever the hell you wanted, but you didn't. You just disappeared. Why should I listen to you now? Brandon, or whatever he was, rolled his eyes and sighed. He began again in a slow, patronizing voice. This is for your own good, Dad. Bullshit, he yelled. Pongo cowered at the sudden change in Bob's voice and slunked his head low in Brandon's lap. You didn't talk to any of us for years. You ran off and got into drugs. It ruined your mother. Our marriage ended because of you. If you'll just let me— Why? Why? Bob demanded. Damn it, Dad. You think I could tell you anything? This is exactly why I couldn't. Look at you. Listen to you. Your dead son materializes to tell you something to help you, to save you, and you're so damn wrapped up in yourself that you can't even listen. Brandon was yelling now. He stood, stepped toward his father, and reached out his hands. This is why I couldn't tell you, he said, taking Bob's hands in his. The room fell away, replaced by a scene. Jilly, Bob, and Brandon, all alive, sitting around a dinner table. Jilly had decorated, and 3 orange candles were displayed in a centerpiece of pine cones and silver turkeys. Brandon sat with his head down, murmuring, barely audible. I just don't think it's right. I don't want to do it anymore, he said, eyes on his plate, avoiding his father's face. Bullshit, the past version of Bob was yelling. He threw down his napkin and continued. Your mother worked to make dinner, and you're going to eat it. I don't want to hear another word. Brandon's plate was filled with what Bob considered sides. Salad, potatoes, corn, no turkey, no dressing, no gravy. Brandon was in high school when he announced at Thanksgiving dinner that he no longer wanted to eat meat. For all his protests and arguments, Bob couldn't stop him, and gave up arguing in time. The scene changed again. It was years later. Brandon was sitting in the living room with a college acceptance letter in his hand. Bob blinked his eyes, wanting the scene to disappear. He saw himself, his younger self, pacing the floor and hollering again. You're not going to some bullshit liberal college. You're going to a reputable school, and then you're going to work in my company. What is wrong with you? People would kill for this opportunity. Several times, past Brandon tried to interject. Each time, past Bob had shut him down. They revisited another scene. They were in a doctor's office. Bob saw himself a few years younger, and a younger image of his son. Brandon's eyes were red and puffy. He was pleading with the double of his father. The specters from the past went back and forth. Dad, please. They said he can live another year or more. And cost me how much money in vet bills and medicine? Past Bob had shot back. He looked now to a metal examining table in the background and saw Pongo, lethargic, graying and old. Past Pongo was breathing heavily, eyes shifting to look at Bob and Brandon. None of them appeared to notice the visitors, future versions of themselves, like watching a movie play out. We're going to stop treatment and just put him to sleep, past Bob issued matter-of-factly when the vet returned to the exam room. Are you sure? She asked, her voice showing skepticism. He could still have a good quality of life for at least another several months or a year. There's really no need to— My decision is final, not up for discussion. And that was it. Present Bob began to understand. He stepped toward Brandon and stopped just short of issuing the apology that was overdue. He looked at Brandon, then Pongo, but he didn't speak right away. Bob closed his eyes and began shaking his head. Okay, make it stop. They were back in Brandon's room. Bob opened his eyes. Maybe I shouldn't have run away. I didn't know what else to do. I can't go back in time to do things differently then, but I can help you now. That's all I want to do. Please, let me show you. Bob was shaken. He tried to cover it with his stony expression, saved for board meetings, his poker face that shielded him from bad news. What is this, Brandon? For years I've tried to find you. Your mother— Of all things, Brandon, drugs— You were in trouble with drugs. You could have just come to us. We taught you better than that. That was a lie, Dad. I was never on drugs. But you overdosed. The police report. Cops aren't coroners, and besides, we'll get to that. But for now, I have to show you some things. Trust me, please. Bob nodded curtly. He felt sick. If not drugs, then what? How? Why? Brandon picked up a remote from his bed and aimed it at the TV across the room. Have a seat, Dad. He patted the bed beside him. As if on cue, Pongo also leapt onto the bed and curled his head again into Brandon's lap. Bob sat down apprehensive, but curiosity piqued. The flat screen powered on, and a scene began to play. "What is this?" Bob asked. "Just watch." "What, hamsters? You want me to see hamsters?" "Jesus, Dad, they're guinea pigs." He watched. 3 guinea pigs, chubby, furry, white, black, and brown, scuttled about. One ran in circles, jumping and turning all at once, squealing in what Bob assumed to be delight. They were surrounded by leafy vegetables and hay. He smiled in spite of himself at the squeaking, jumping guinea pig. "That's called popcorning, Dad, and it means they're happy." "Okay, popcorning. Happy guinea pigs. What is this?" Princess, Buffy, and Berta, all rescues, playing, eating, running around, happy, doing what they love to do. Bob was still confused. "What does this have to do with me?" Before they were rescued, these guinea pigs were called X256, X257, and X258. And they were in your lab. Bob's face fell. "So what is this, some Charles Dickens Christmas Eve guilt trip?" "It's part of what I need to show you, Dad. You have a choice." Bob remembered the fortune-teller's words. He shook his head, trying to shake the image away. "You have a choice. Right now, you are causing the suffering of thousands. It's only going to get worse." "For Christ's sake, they're animals!" Pongo growled low. Brandon soothed him by petting his head. "They're rodents, Brandon. Seriously." "There's more," Brandon continued. "Well, it better be something important." "Damn, Brandon, you're dead, somehow you're here, you haven't spoken to me in years, and you show me damn rodents?" "Must be important then, don't you think?" Bob was silent. Brandon pulled a disc off a shelf. It was marked with Cartwright security labeling. "Hey, how'd you get that?" "Don't worry, just watch." Brandon put the disc into the DVD player and hit play. Blurry black and white footage appeared, then cleared up. A slender man in a lab coat with thinning hair was going cage to cage in the lab, clipboard in hand. He jotted notes, then looked over his shoulder, several times in each direction before proceeding. He opened a cage, began removing guinea pigs, then rats. Some of them tried to hide, to no avail. Some squeaked, this time an obviously different sound from the happy animals in the prior scene. "What the hell is he doing?" "Watch," Brandon said. The man hid them in a container, concealed by his lab coat, and walked briskly from the room. "I'll have him fired." "Too late," Brandon replied. "What? Why?" "Your company fired him already, but not for theft. He was bitten while retrieving one of the animals for an experiment. Legally." "So?" "The wound got infected. He took too many days off, violated your company policy. He was terminated." "Serves him right." "Does it? Then what is the punishment due to someone who does this?" Brandon clicked the remote, and the room once again fell away. They were in a sterile, white and gray lab. All around them, stacked cages, tiny, filthy, held white rats, mice, and guinea pigs. Scratching, chewing, and desperate squeaking filled the room. Some compulsively pulled on the metal tubes attached to their water bottles, out of boredom or anxiety. The stench of ammonia from unwashed cages filled the air, and Bob choked, trying to breathe as the fumes burned his lungs. "You think it's bad for us," Brandon began. "Imagine how the smell is hitting them." "What, are you working for PETA?" Bob snarled, coughing. "Just showing you what goes on under your leadership at Cartwright Lab." "I know damn well." "Do you?" Brandon asked. He walked into another room behind a door marked "Security Clearance Required." Here, a team was restraining several rodents, guinea pigs in small enclosures, held from motion, injecting them with liquid and measuring them. Some had patches of hair shaved. Others had obvious injuries, swollen eyes, missing teeth. His eyes fixed on one, a calico who, strangely, seemed to look into his eyes as well. His shrill squeaks desperately appealing to Bob's better angels, but no better angels responded. A man dressed in a lab coat and gloves walked by, wheeling a large garbage can. Bob looked down to see it was filled with the bodies of various rodents. "Yes, but this is part of what's required to get FDA approval. I have no choice." "You do. A man has been trying to meet with you, Dad. His name is—" "Mark, yes, but that is pseudoscience. It's not what we do." "It's not what you choose. You are in a position to change the landscape of pharmaceutical production forever. You could be on the cutting edge. You could legitimize this technology, but it's too risky. We could lose money. We could lose investors. You have a choice, and if you don't make serious changes soon, there is more you stand to lose." "What? What do you mean?" I told you I'm here to help you. The scene changed back to Brandon's room. You have a choice. What do you expect me to do? For now, watch. Bob shut his eyes in dismay, anticipating what may come next. Brandon took his father's hand. He had the sudden feeling of disconnection from gravity, the bottoming out, hollow feeling produced by a roller coaster's descent. When the ground beneath his feet became solid again, he opened his eyes. And I'm just going to stop us for a second to make sure that we are still running. And it appears that we are. Great, okay. Okay. When the ground beneath his feet became solid again, he opened his eyes. They were in a concert hall. Wreaths and sparkling lights hung from the doorways. A packed audience filled row upon row of fake red velvet seats. He recognized the Bellevue Theater, a historic building now used for prestigious shows of all kinds. He and Jilly used to come here to see her favorite musicals earlier in their marriage. When Brandon was small, they brought him to holiday performances of the Nutcracker, though he had about as much interest in the show as he would have in watching paint dry. Tonight, however, Bob noticed his son's attention was fixed on someone in the audience. A woman, about Brandon's age, sat alone, watching the stage where a banner was draped from the ceiling. It read, Children's Choir, Christmas 2018. He looked from the woman back to his son. He had been about to remind him of how much his mother loved this place, but stopped short. His son's eyes were glistening. Brandon had a look on his face of sadness, longing, and something else. Despair, maybe? When was the last time he had seen this expression on his son's face? When was the last time he had bothered to notice? Bob was beginning to feel pangs of guilt, heat spreading across his face, reminders of his many failings as a father, suddenly becoming too much. Who is she? Why are we here? He finally asked. You'll see soon, Brandon answered, his voice somber now. The lights dimmed. On the stage, curtains pulled away to reveal a choir of children. They could be no more than 12 or 13 years old. A girl stepped forward, glittering red beads in her braided hair, illuminated by the spotlight. From the orchestra pit, a song emerged. She began to sing, O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. He marveled at the powerful voice, impossibly aligned with such a small child. She could be the next Aretha, he whispered to his son. But she won't be, he replied. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angels' voices. Harmonies from the chorus behind her filled the auditorium. Why not? Her mother, the woman you asked about, will be arrested in a few hours. O night divine, Brandon continued. She will be sent to live with her grandmother, who will die within 2 years of having Brianna in her custody. You know her name? Brandon was silent, lost in thought for a moment, then cleared his throat and continued. She will end up in a foster home, and after being sold to her foster father's friends for drug money, will run away and live on the street. No more concerts after tonight. What does that have to do with me? The singing continued. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. Bob felt a chill run down his spine. The scene dissipated. He felt cold air seep into his bones. He could see his breath. They stood in the dark in the familiar lot outside Cartwright Laboratory. Car lights faded and disappeared in the distance, and an engine was silenced. He hopped lightly, foot to keep warm, eyeing Brandon, who was oblivious to the cold. Of course he was, he thought. 3 figures approached in the dark, dressed head to foot in black, bundles in their arms concealed by the night. Don't even tell me, he began. She's one of these animal fanatics? These nuts caused me a lot of stress last year. Serves them right. Watch. One of the approaching group punched in a code, and the entrance was breached. Bob had suspected it had been an inside job, or at least aided by an insider. He recalled the destruction and property loss this burglary had caused, how it had almost been a setback during a critical time in their testing of an important new drug, Onvicap. From what he recalled from the security briefing, it would be about 11 p.m. As he waited in silence, the group entered one by one. Bob wondered how long he would be stuck in the cold, and for what. He was familiar with this break-in. He had been briefed on it and seen the security report. It had been taken care of. A car approached in the distance, the driver in black, face concealed. He pulled up to the door, the getaway car. Then sirens, more cars, police surrounded the lab. The bust had been thanks to his security director. Remote cameras had been installed in the nearby streets, not only in the parking lot. The idea for the additional cameras had come after the last break-in. Bob now thought he should have given his security director a bonus that year, but it had slipped his mind. The suspicious group had been seen this time, and were now outnumbered. 4 cop cars sped into the parking lot. The perks of being a generous donor to the mayor and police department, he thought, smiling. But his smile faded as he recalled the image of the little girl, the woman. She must be one of the intruders. Police rushed into the building, guns drawn. Bob tensed, then chastised himself. I don't know why I'm here. I already know what's going to happen. No injuries, no deaths. He had been told he would not have to worry about lawsuits. He now watched as 3 figures, clad in black, were dragged violently from the building and hauled into police cars. Brandon didn't bother to shush him. Instead, he remained still, eyes fixed on the scene. The man in the getaway car lunged toward the police. A gun blast, and the man in black, former driver of the now grounded getaway car, slumped to the ground. Bob stepped closer. This had not been included in the report he'd been given. Brandon took his father's hand then, turning him away as the scene faded. He wanted to know more. Who was that driver? Why had no one told him? But he allowed himself to be distracted by his new, warmer surroundings. A family room, table set with mounds of roasted vegetables, salads, bowls of stew, a Christmas tree in the corner, decked with photos and handmade ornaments. Holiday cards hung on the wall, reading, Happy Holidays, and All the Best in 2018. The little girl with the beautiful voice, Brianna, Brandon had called her, was running through the room, holding a stuffed dog. Will you sing for us, Bree? The familiar voice shocked him. He turned to see Brandon, a few years younger, around the time he had left home, smiling on one knee, eye level with the girl. Behind him, the woman stood. There was a ring on her finger, he now noticed. You were engaged? He asked, surprised. Was. Yes, this is Sylvie. His voice broke slightly. Brianna began to sing. Bob looked to the specter of his son. His eyes closed, a tear emerging in one corner. He felt odd intruding on this private moment in his son's past, and even more awkward watching this outpouring of emotion from a ghost. As long as she doesn't sing on-chain melody, he quipped to himself, but the joke didn't lighten his mood. He focused on the happy couple, the little girl. At least this wasn't a dismal scene. Their excitement was palpable, their love obvious. Bree finished the song and bowed. Younger Brandon laughed heartily, then lifted the child high in the air. You sing like an angel. Does that mean you go on top of the tree? She squealed with laughter and kicked her legs in excitement, almost kneeing him in the eye. He and Sylvie laughed. What are you going to name the puppy? Sylvie asked after Brandon had set her down on the sofa. Star, Brianna had answered. That's a beautiful name. I love puppies, and when I grow up, I'm going to start my own rescue so no puppies have to go to the pound and die. Not even puppies from the lab. Bob winced. The Beagles weren't the best for PR, but the general public wasn't supposed to know about them, let alone this little girl. What kind of monster puts puppies in an experiment, Mom? Not just puppies. All animals deserve respect. They have as much right to live as any of us. Putting puppies in a cage? That's like slavery, isn't it, Mom? Well, does the puppy get to choose what he or she wants to do? When they want to leave? Do they get to be with their families and do things they love? Sylvie asked. No, they get told what to do by people. And if you were stuck somewhere you didn't want to be, doing work for someone else, where you couldn't make any choices, would that be right? Sylvie asked. No, that's not fair. Putting any living being in confinement against their will and forcing them to work is abuse, and yes, slavery, Sylvie answered. She turned to young Brandon. Ever since Bree learned about the Underground Railroad, she's been obsessed with it. Bree's face turned solemn, and she added, My mom's great, very old grandparents were alive then. They might have gotten out, and then they might have helped. Might have. But white people kept the records and didn't bother to keep track of our people, unless it was to sell or buy us. So the people who put puppies in cages, They're like slave owners, and the puppies are like the slaves. So is there an underground railroad for puppies? Bree asked, clearly calculating this equation as she formed the words. Sylvie and Brandon turned to look at each other, not sure how to respond. Finally, Sylvie answered. There are a lot of people trying to change things. Then she thought for a moment and added, Bree, do you know what ended slavery of black people? Civil War and marches, Bree answered decisively. Not exactly. Slavery didn't end completely. It has changed shape. People can't be outright slaves, but they are enslaved in other ways. In a racist prison system, for one. Liberation is a work in progress. For people, puppies, and other animals. Bree hugged her stuffed dog and looked at the table. We love animals, that's why we don't eat them. And then added, I'm hungry. Is it time for the feast now? Brandon and Sylvie laughed and headed for the table. Bob smiled, but his own stomach was turning like the wheels in his mind. And who do we thank? Sylvie asked as they took their seats. The ancestors, the mother goddess, and the bad guys. The bad guys? Brandon asked. Yes, all the good guys and all the bad guys. Goddess bless us, everyone. It's easier to let her figure things out. Bob wondered if present Bree, he corrected himself, would still say a blessing for the bad guys. He knew that included him. In her mind at least, the bad guys who locked up puppies, rats, guinea pigs, who were responsible for locking up her mother. She did it to herself. She deserves to be punished, he barked back at himself, this time out loud. You think so? His son's ghost asked. Yes, stop asking me that. Yes, of course. If you commit a crime, you deserve to be punished. You get what is coming to you. What about what Brianna said, the Underground Railroad? Or what about the families who helped Jews escape from Nazis? Are you saying that Jews and black people deserve to be lowered to the level of animals? No, Brandon replied. I'm saying that animals deserve to be given the same basic consideration as all people. All people. As long as the classification of subhuman exists, we will subject others to atrocities. Bob considered this. He felt his head throb as if he were physically stretching his mind apart, trying to fit in these ideas that didn't make sense, but also that he could not completely argue against. Who had taught his son to be so thoughtful, sensitive? It hadn't been him, he realized. There were so many things he would have liked to learn about the person his son was, that he would never know. He hadn't known his son was engaged. He actually had never known Brandon to date anyone, and for a while was worried his son would never take an interest in women at all. He had no idea Brandon was helping to raise a child, or that he had such strong views. The thought crept back into his mind that Brandon wasn't the one who abandoned the family. Perhaps it was Bob who had made himself a stranger in his own home. Speaking of which, there is one more thing I must show you, and it is the last thing I can show you. Beyond that, the final lesson you must face alone. Time is running out. It's too bad we can't stay here, in this happy memory, a little longer, Bob mused out loud. Yes, you have no idea, Brandon's voice trailed off. He watched the happy trio laughing and eating, oblivious to the tragedies that would befall them the coming year. They were back in Brandon's room now. It was quiet and strangely cold for being inside a well-heated mansion. If nothing else, I want you to see what lies in store for you. If nothing else, Dad. If not for the animals, for Bree, Sylvie, or for me, I want you to take what I'm about to show you to heart. Brandon sat on the bed again. Bob followed suit. Pongo sat stoically at his feet, facing the flat-screen television. Brandon powered it on with the remote once again. This time, he seemed to be fast-forwarding. Dates flew by on the screen. He settled on December 2020. A young boy was being interviewed on the news. Reporters calling his recovery a Christmas miracle thanks to Envicap. In another scene, Bob saw himself smiling, shaking hands with the boy's family, stopping for a photo with young Tom. Well, that doesn't look so bad, he reflected. News headlines flashed across the screen. His company's stock soared. It was everything he had wanted to see. It will look that way at first, but wait, Brandon hit the remote again. 2021. The same reporter now looked somber. We bring you a tragic update tonight. You'll recall our breaking story a year ago today. The miracle drug approved by the FDA, Envicap, touted as a cure for rare childhood cancer and pioneered with the help of a brave young boy, Tommy Plymouth, with seemingly incredible results. Well, tonight we inform you that Tommy is dead. Bob didn't have time to stifle a gasp. "There's no way," he began. "In spite of what appeared to be a dramatic recovery, Tommy's illness resurfaced, and it is now believed the cancer was able to spread more aggressively because of a genetic mutation brought about by the drug that was supposed to cure him. It is unclear how many of the drug's early trials have had the same tragic results." Bob Cartwright, owner and founder of Cartwright Pharmaceuticals, couldn't be reached for an interview, but his assistant issued a statement calling this a, quote, "tragic fluke." Then footage of massive protests and social media backlash against Cartwright and his company. "He won't be the only one." "But we tested it on animals whose bodies do not react the same way as a human body." "Well, sometimes this happens. I mean, one incident." "Not just one," Brandon continued. "Within 2 years, there will be thousands. Thousands dead. Lawsuits, bankruptcy, prison." "Prison?" "It will be alleged that in haste to bring the drug to market, your researchers exaggerated their claims and overlooked risk factors." He didn't argue, because he knew his business. He knew that high-profile drugs should be highly scrutinized, but were often treated in the opposite manner, because the benefits of being first and profitable outweighed the risks of... His son's words came back to him then. "As long as we allow a group to be considered subhuman." Because the truth was, from the comfort of his office, he didn't see the rats or the beagles. He didn't see the guinea pigs, human or otherwise. He didn't have to see. He had known the desperate would be first in line to volunteer their children for it. He had known. On some level, he had known that even if they weren't caged, even if they weren't confined, they were trapped because their only other option was death. Wasn't that why, his conscience nagged at him? Wasn't that why he went into development of drugs that treated childhood cancers? Because on some level he knew, as compared to medications for less lethal, less desperate conditions, on some level he knew that he could really do no wrong. If it works, he's a hero. If not, well, they were as good as dead to begin with. In their desperation, he had reasoned, at least on some subconscious level, they were of no higher order than the rat, the dog, or the guinea pig. And what then did that make him? "You can change it, Dad. If you really want an effective drug, Mark can help you." Had he wanted an effective drug, or easy profits from the desperate? Was a cure financially viable for him? His hand instinctively went to his chest to cover a pain brewing, gnawing, anxiety-laden reminder that, as Bree had astutely pointed out, he was among the monsters. "It's not too late," Brandon said, "but it is getting to be past my time. I have to go now. I feel like I only just now am getting to know you. I'm sorry. I wish it had been different." "It's not too late for others. You can change it for them. I love you, Dad. I love you too. And no matter what, I'm proud of the man you grew into." "You say that now," Brandon began. "And I mean it, son. No matter what, I love you." "I hope so." He was gone. Bob's head fell into both hands, and he sobbed out loud, heaving. Then a cold nose interrupted his cries. Pongo was still there. He barked and motioned to the door. "The final scene. You have to show me?" he asked. How silly, he thought, like the dog was going to answer him. But Pongo motioned to the door with his body. Bob stood. Before moving on, he said, "I'm sorry, Pong. I let you go too soon. Like Brandon, I let you go too soon." Pongo barked once, then padded forward. Bob followed behind. He expected to open the door onto the hallway, but instead of leading into the rest of the house, they were back again, in the cold, in the parking lot of Cartwright Lab. December 24th, 2018. They had re-entered the scene of the burglary, the Underground Railroad, as Bree would have called it. The police cars were dispersing, all but one. Ralph recognized Sheriff Farrell. They were friends, or at least associates on a business level. It was good to have law enforcement in your pocket. The sheriff stood over the body on the ground, the man who leapt from the getaway car. He reached down, with gloved hands, removing the man's ski mask. Bob cried out, but the scene remained unchanged. "Aw, fuck," the sheriff uttered to himself. He retrieved his phone and made a call, then waited. "Frank, sorry to wake you. Bad news. There's been a break-in. Yep, yeah, some animal rights nuts. They've been arrested, but we have a problem. Silence, save for Frank's muffled voice. Bob's head swam with confusion. He felt as if he had been knocked in the gut with an anvil. How could he? How could he? How could he? As he asked this over and over, he wasn't even sure if he referred to his son, dead on the ground, or the two men, associates, colleagues, friends, who had covered it up. You want me to lie to him? Are you sure? And now, even muffled over the phone, he heard Frank's response. Make it go away. We don't need this kind of press right now. And his own voice echoed in his head. Actions have consequences. Deserve what's coming to them. Not this. Not this. He couldn't undo the scene before him. He watched as the sheriff hauled Brandon's dead body into the back of the car, tossed with as much thought as his staff gave a dead guinea pig hauled into the trash barrel. He cried out, and Pongo joined him in a deep alto howl. Brandon, 12/25/2019, 1 o'clock a.m. He was growing weaker, which meant Renee was too. He owed it to her to not overstay. She would suffer enough as it was, but he had one more stop to make. Sylvie was awake in a cell. She looked haggard, but he still thought she was beautiful. I'm here, my love. Merry Christmas. I tried my best. It's up to him now. She looked up suddenly. He knew she sensed him. She couldn't see, or didn't trust herself to believe it possible, but he knew she sensed him. I love you, and he was gone again. Guess who? Bob again. 12/25/2019, 7 o'clock a.m. The music infiltrated his sleep. He heard Bing Crosby singing, something about a mighty king sleeping in a castle warm. He blinked his eyes open. It had been the worst night, the worst dream. Some horrible conspiracy someone had put into his ex-wife's head, that Brandon's death had been some kind of cover-up, the story that eventually led to her breakdown and their breakup, because she could never believe he had been on drugs. She refused to accept that he had overdosed. It must have been a dream, he told himself, but part of him was not so sure. He made his way down from Brandon's room. Why was I in there? And stumbled into the kitchen. On the counter he saw two things that made him freeze in his tracks. The first was a card. Merry Christmas, Dad. You're not too late. Love, Brandon and Pongo, dated 12/25/2019. The second was a stuffed dog. Well loved and well worn, in the short time it had belonged to a little girl named Brianna. Still Bob, later on Christmas Day. 12/25/2019, 11:48 a.m. Hello? Donnery. Yes? It's Cartwright. I know this may be a bad time, but, well, first off, Merry Christmas. Silence. You there, Donnery? Yes, sir. Yes, I'm just, well, no surprise that a hard-working man like yourself would be working today, but I didn't expect... I know. I want to discuss your alternative model. When? As soon as possible. We have time, but not much time. He smiled as he hung up the phone. With each step taken, each new act, he felt relieved. He dialed again. A woman answered. Hello, this is Bob Cartwright. Yeah, huh? Came the groggy response. Yeah, Renee, right? The tarot reader? First, I want to apologize for my reaction last night. Second, I want to offer you a job as a consultant for my company. We are going to go through some major rebranding projects, and I could definitely use someone with your, insight. And another call. Hello? Frank. Yeah, boss, Merry Christmas. Yeah, look, I need you to do me a favor. Cancel all donations to Sheriff Farrell's campaign. Got it. Okay, also, get me the name of the man who was fired 2 years ago. He had an infection, scrawny lab guy. Get his name and number for me. Do that now, will you? Then call me back. Bob waited 20 minutes. The phone rang again. It's done, boss. Regarding Farrell. As for the other matter, guy's name is Steve Blanchard. He's at 349-555-2555. Great. And one last thing. Yeah, whatever you say, boss. You're fired. Silence. Wait, what? I know about Brandon. You'll never set foot in Cartwright again, and if you do, I'll have you arrested. I'll also see to it you never work in this town again. Only a few more for today, he decided. Bob dialed and then waited. Hello? Hello, is this Steve? Speaking, yes. Steve, Merry Christmas. This is Bob Cartwright, your former boss. You're fucking joking, right? Narrator's note. Steve is a worldly guy, and would normally have yelled bah humbug, but his wife had given him a copy of Thy Secret as an early Christmas gift, and he was very aware of the energy of his words now. So instead, he simply shouted, "Oh fuck," a few times. We'll see if it works. No. Yeah, right, no way that clown is calling me. It is in fact that clown. Honestly, I owe you an apology. Taking the business in a new direction now, I'm getting away from live vivisection, and I suddenly find myself in need of an assistant. Are you interested in the position? Brianna, 12/27/2019, 11 o'clock a.m. Sherwin! He lumbered down the steps following the voice summoning him. Yes, what is it? You okay? You're not going to believe this. She was smiling through tears and looked up. What is it? Brianna ran into the kitchen, startled by her grandmother's shrill cries, considering she seldom spoke in anything but an indoor voice. What is it, Nana? Are you okay? Uncle Sherwin? I just got a phone call. Nana was out of breath, laughing now. Sylvie's coming home. The charges are being dropped. Can they do that all of a sudden? They can and they are. It was the old man, Bree said. They both turned to look at her. She couldn't understand why they were so surprised. It all seemed perfectly normal to her. But she humored them. The bad man with the lab, he changed his mind. Brandon showed me in a dream. He's not really a bad man after all. Goddess blessed him and he got a clue. I don't care what he got, all I care about is Sylvie's coming home. Bob survived Christmas. Finally, it's a new day. Or is it? 12/28/2019, 10:30 a.m. Mr. Cartwright, we weren't expecting you. His lab supervisor sounded panicked. It's okay, Bill. Last minute change of plans. I need to talk to you all about it, so I figured I would pay a visit. The sound of a rolling cart interrupted him. A woman wearing gloves and a hairnet and full lab coat shuffled by. She pushed a garbage bin. He walked over and stopped her, put one hand on the ledge, and peered inside. Heaped in the bin were hundreds of lifeless bodies. He began to choke back a sob. The lab crew glanced around, looking anxiously among themselves. Bob thought of the scene in Schindler's List, when Oskar Schindler took off his ring and threw it, in agony, reflecting on his folly, being too late, saving too few. But he was no Oskar Schindler. The comparison, he knew, was too generous. No hero, no savior. He was responsible for the suffering of so many. He reached in and picked up one of the cold, stiff bodies, slightly flat on one side from being heaped on so many others. Glazed eyes stared up at him. He thought of Princess and... what had their other names been? The 2 guinea pigs rescued with her, given a new chance, frolicking, popcorning, Brandon had called it. What we have been doing here, he began absently, is not good. It's not right. I know you were told to do it and rewarded for doing it, but there's no reason, he drifted into thought, still looking into the barrel. There's no reason why, in the 21st century, there's no reason to continue this way. He gently replaced the dead guinea pig, looking up at his staff now, one to another, making eye contact. We need to step into the 21st century and become leaders in the industry. Leaders in compassion and accuracy. I have reason to believe another model, an alternative to vivisection, will better serve us. But, sir, with all due respect, we are so close to FDA approval. It will fail. If not in the FDA, then in real life. Not a chance I want to take. I'll help each of you find placement on a team implementing the new system, or help relocate you if suitable. But we will be phasing out vivisection before it's too late. Too late, sir? He thought for a moment, then replied, This has gone on long enough. Author's note. This story exists in part because many years ago a man named Charles Dickens infused socialist views into a catchy tale that came to be retold again and again in every way conceivable. I can't get enough of Dickens' A Christmas Carol and look forward to every retelling. Also in part because I was driving for several hours and ran out of good music to listen to. This story also came into existence because I grew impatient waiting for someone to write a Frank Capra-style holiday story with vegan and animal rights themes, and decided to take matters into my own hands. The general themes of animal experimentation and the philosophical and moral arguments made against vivisection are real, as are the comparisons to slavery and other human atrocities. The concept of an underground railroad for animal liberation is also real. Whether they use code words pertaining to one's uncle's house, or whether individual liberationists use the moniker Elfie or not, I can't say. I would like to think they have greater resistance to bad puns. Bob Cartwright and the other characters described herein are fictitious. However, the practice of experimentation on live animals, including guinea pigs and dogs, particularly beagles, is all too real and sadly common. The suffering these animals endure is very real, as is the psychological impact of dissociation and cognitive dissonance required by human staff experimenting on them. On a lighter note, guinea pigs do in fact run and jump when excited, and yes, this is called popcorning. Brandon is a fictional character, and so is Renee, the tarot reader. However, if you ever happen to find yourself sitting at a psychic's table at a holiday party, kindly refrain from being rude. They work hard for their money. Cartwright Pharmaceuticals may exist, but if it does, it is not the impetus for this work of fiction. I thought through the plot while driving, remember? And besides, this is not intended to be an academically researched treatise on vivisection. If it was, don't you think I would have bothered to assign a specific type of childhood cancer to Tommy? It is important to give credit where it is due, and so it is worth noting that Gordon Lightfoot is not a fictional character, and his beautiful ballad, Song for a Winter's Night, is referenced in this piece. If your love of Christmas music is based on commercially produced seasonal tunes rehashed by pop music stars, chances are the verses from O Holy Night and Do You Hear What I Hear, also referenced in this story, will be new to you. So, side note, originally I wanted to actually have quotes from these songs, but since O Holy Night is the only one of them that's in the public domain, I had to take out the quotes that were supposed to be from the other song that is alluded to, which is Noel Regni's Do You Hear What I Hear? Do You Hear What I Hear is a real song by Noel Regni. Yes, it does feature a verse in which a child challenges a wealthy and powerful king. Imagine that. In the original O Holy Night, there is a line that speaks of revolution and empowerment. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. O Holy Night was originally based on a poem by Placide Cappeau. I'm assuming that's how to pronounce that. I don't know for sure. The literal translation of the lyrics was adapted by John Sullivan Dwight and features the above line. In this story, it is sung by Brianna and the children's choir. In reality, it is often neglected. So when there's pop stars remaking O Holy Night, very often they leave out that verse, and that's very unfortunate. If you are inclined to sing, well or otherwise, I encourage you to include this important line. I'm not suggesting that you absolutely must add this to your list of revolutionary Christmas carols and perform them far and wide regardless of season, but if you feel compelled to do so, don't let me stop you. Mark Donnery does not exist, but alternatives to animal testing are real, and an awakening is taking place in both food and medicine. If the thought of millions suffering in laboratories has put a damper on your holiday season, remember that, like Bob, you have a choice. The following resources will help you vote with your dollars and back companies that do not test on animals. And I'm going to put these links below, but just to speak the name of the organizations. National Anti-Vivisection Society, American Anti-Vivisection Society, Humane Decisions, Cruelty-Free Shopping Guide. And of course, don't forget, this is intended not only to spread awareness and make a Christmas story that involves animal liberation, but also, and very importantly, as a fundraiser for New York Farm Animal Save. Please check out their website, www.newyork, which is nyfarmanimalsave.org. That's all one word. I will also put that in a link below for you to go directly to. And feel free to donate some money to them if you like this story, if you didn't like this story, if you just want to see if it'll make me shut up. Please contribute to their efforts, and if you happen to be in the downstate New York area, please consider joining them on one of their regular vigils outside of a laboratory where animal experimentation is taking place. And the other epilogue. Why not try your hand at self-publishing during Mercury retrograde? What can possibly go wrong? I was unhappy with information learned shortly after publishing an earlier version of this story. In order for this to be a second edition, it must be changed from the original to a greater extent than simply editing a few typos. So even running through and replacing excessive uses of first names with pronouns would not be enough. nor is changing the name of only one character throughout and adding snarky and unnecessary narrator comments and chapter titles. So a few additional words in order to change the story. You may have hoped that Jilly would come back and she and Bob could reunite and live happily ever after. Please keep in mind you've just read about time travel, spirit communication, materialization of disembodied spirits, and a company executive deciding to put up morality above profit. There are only so many boundaries I can push in one story. It would be nice to think that many a CEO would be visited this Christmas Eve by the ghosts of their past, maybe a collective of disembodied workers rising up from the grave to remind the living whose deaths they have profited off of, maybe a rallying of rodents, beagles, horses, cows, chickens, pigs, not to mention turkeys. Their apparitions are a reminder of the choices we have made for the past year and the consequences of those choices. Why is this end-of-year karmic rehashing such a fascinating trope? Is it, in fact, a trope, or a motif, or a theme? The secret's out. Somebody never got an MFA. Yet I believe we are fascinated by this idea for a few reasons. The belief in spiritual karma, or that the universe finds a way to tally and redistribute energy, is reassuring. It means there's a great and mysterious Marxian being in the sky redistributing the wealth and doling out the occasional kick-ass gift basket when warranted. I believe in karma, but also in the necessity of each person doing their part to contribute to the creation of change. I also suspect there is something primal in the waning year that reaches a deep level of our humanity. In the growing darkness, we may find ourselves haunted by the ghosts of our own past and our own unresolved longings. We may find ourselves in the season of Capricorn, a sign ruled by Saturn, the Lord of Karma, facing the music we helped to create. So as we have visions of sugar plums dancing on our heads, or visions of revolution, a blue wave, animal liberation, general strikes, a future in which everyone is vegan and the wealthy are taxed 90% of their income, we must also consider what steps we are willing to take in order to create this future. Perhaps a New Year's resolution that commits us to different spending habits or empowers us to form alliances with others who are working toward our common goals. Whatever you decide, may the great Mother Goddess bless us, everyone, and may she figure out what to do with the bad guys. And quick, I'm getting tired of their asses. Thank you for listening. Happy holidays, and don't forget to kindly contribute what you can to the New York Farm Animal Save. Thank you for watching, and may you have a happy holiday season.